Hi, and welcome to Project Synapse, our weekly show where John Pinard, Marcel Gagne, and I get together to discuss what's happening in AI. And we feature a lot of these shows on hashtag trending on the weekend. This week, there's just no other way to start the show. I normally get everybody together and we do an intro, but Marcel started on a fascinating topic, and we're going to join us right in the middle of that. Okay, where the hell am I? Who am I? What am I doing? It's
I
Friday morning.
I ask those same questions every day. Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? Oh, yes, I remember.
Does anybody answer?
Usually me, which frightens me a
No.
little bit.
Yeah, that could be scary. Yeah. And especially if the voice sounds like it's coming from outside your head.
Are you familiar with the concept of the bicameral mind?
I know the term, but I haven't.
Okay, I have a blog post on that topic, and interestingly enough, I tie it into the concept of artificial intelligence, which to me is fascinating, given that the theory of the bicameral mind was back about 3,000 years ago. If you go back to the writings of the theory is modern, but the idea goes back 3,000 years ago, because about 3,000 years ago, if you go back and take a look at earlier writings, people always talked as though there was a second voice in their heads, as though there was actually a second entity. They thought about it as a god, as an angel, as a whatever, but it was a separate, defined entity that would tell you what to do or tell you what not to do, not like a conscience, but an actual honest to God voice.
Yeah.
To you. And about 3,000 years ago, over the course of a couple of centuries, all of that faded from the writing, and people would talk about talking to yourself as opposed to an actual separate entity in your head. It's almost as if something happened to our minds to shut off that second intelligence, so to speak, that co-intelligence that we lived with.
Really?
Yeah, and it's throughout the world. Like, you can look at writings throughout the world that happened about that shift. That's
Bicameral mind.
Yeah, bicameral mind.
And you could actually be your own best friend.
Except that this wasn't really a best friend in the sense that they were actually, it was your best friend because he was always there, but it was like, it was always with you, rather, is what I should say.
Yeah.
It's funny because when Christine was young, she used to have a friend called Chimers who was in her ear. And I went, oh, Christ, here it comes, the early onslaught of schizophrenia. But apparently that's quite normal for kids. And then the friend just goes away.
Apparently, adults used to have that friend all the time. So we all had it, and it stuck with us throughout our entire lives. And somewhere, like I said, about 3,000 years ago in the literature, it slowly, over the course of a couple of centuries, starts to fade away completely. I pasted the link where I wrote about it. And the reason I called it the new bicameral minds is because in a world where everybody is starting to develop their own personal co-intelligence, and you have to remember, if you look at any of the literature on how chatbots are being used, you know this, Jim, I know, because you've done a segment on it. Something like 40% of what people use ChatGPT for, as in 4 out of every 10 people use it as a chat companion, as possibly a romantic companion, a friend, or a therapist. Okay, so they're not using it to answer questions or do research. They're using it as the confidant, as a best friend. And I was theorizing that what we're doing is we're creating the new bicameral mind, the AI that's always in your ear, that's always ready to talk to you.
Yeah.
Interesting, yeah. Reading a Robert Sawyer book right now, Hominid, because I'm going to meet him. I'm at a book fair with him. He goes to the more famous part. He gets to speak for an hour. I get to speak for 20 minutes. So that tells you what
Rob's
a book.
my buddy. Rob's my buddy. He's like my brother from another mother.
Really?
The first book, Hominids, is the one you're reading? Okay.
Yeah.
Look at the dedication on the first page.
Oh, I got an audiobook, so for the first time.
The book is dedicated to Sally and I.
Oh, interesting. So it's cool. So anyway, so Sawyer's got this idea of this, I don't want to spoil it for people, but the main character in the book turns up and has a
Neanderthal.
Oh, you gave it away now. There you go. Yeah.
John's not going to remember this. John doesn't have that kind of story memory.
Okay, there you go. So anyways, but
Don't
we have
forget,
at
I'm
least-
the youngest of the three of us.
we have at least 3 people who listen to us too. I actually think it's damn sight more than that. But
Well, given
but that's a
that,
surprise to me. We're this little
Relax.
voice for thousands of people on a Saturday morning. We're that little voice in their ear. That's scary. Yeah, but anyway. Yeah, don't abuse it, person. Anyway, but he has this concept of an AI that follows you around everywhere. And this is from what, 2014? Maybe this book? I don't know. It's early. Could be earlier than that. But he's already got this idea of an AI that follows the characters around everywhere. Interesting. And I think he calls the alibi, which I won't give away. But yeah, it's the alibi.
and you wear it on your wrist.
Yeah, you have one that you can hear in your head, and you wear this thing on your wrist, and
Yep.
but they have no crime because everything you do is seen, and so it's hard to get away with anything. It's a really interesting book. I'm glad I picked it up. So there you go. And then I'm going on. I think in Minden, I'm on what I think it's on the 12th. I'm doing a book fair with him. Like I said, I'm actually a little thrilled about it. Yeah. So
Tell him I said hi.
I will. Yeah. If he talks to me, I don't know if the guys who really sell come down and talk to the low life science fiction writers.
For the
But we're
record,
friends.
and I'm not just saying this because he's my friend, but Rob is like one of the most personable guys you'll ever meet.
Oh,
like,
good.
He's an international best-selling author. He's won more awards in science fiction and fantasy than almost anybody else in the world, including all of the 3 major awards, including the Hugo, the Nebula. He's like right up there.
That's the trifecta.
But Rob talks to everybody, and he's a friendly guy. And like I said, he's one of the most personable people I've met. And from a professional perspective, he's highly approachable, and he'll chat with anybody.
Yeah. So-
He has me as a friend, so obviously he does chat with anybody.
There you go. Like, yeah. Why am I afraid? How could I possibly offend Robert Sawyer after he's been you?
I'm sure I've offended him more than once, but
I'm doing a talk on AI in writing. It's as well.
the explosive.
That
Love
should
to
be-
the flip
yeah,
of the wall
that
for that one.
That should set me up really nicely from the start, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
To discuss those things at parties, by the way, just so you know.
Yeah. That's probably why they got me on before noon, because they want to make sure that nobody's had a drink first. Cool. Let's get started. If we haven't, we already started. This is Project Synapse. In case you've come in through the middle of all of this, this is our Friday morning AI talk. I'm from Project Synapse, and I haven't had an AI in a week. No, it's not that sort of AI. It's AI. Yeah, that's AI. That's different. I'm in a different. Yeah, we got Rubik's Cube there. That's good. Okay. Why do you have a Rubik's Cube sitting there?
So I can pretend that I've already solved it.
Oh,
He took all the stickers off and put them back on.
that's what I did the first time. A friend of mine gave me this Rubik's Cube, said, "You'll never solve it." And I went, and I tried for 20 minutes and then got bored. And I just peeled all the stickers off, put them back on, handed it back to him under an hour. And he went, "What?" Okay. So what's happened? Nothing happened this week. You went away last week, Marcel. So we
I
have 2
did.
things to catch up on.
I did.
How was Newfoundland, by the way?
No, it was Nova Scotia. I went to Nova Scotia.
Oh, Nova Scotia. You didn't go to Newfoundland? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I went to Newfoundland last year, but this
Oh,
year
okay.
I went to Nova Scotia. So
Yep.
I've done all the provinces. I hadn't done the territories yet. Nova Scotia, absolutely loved it. And in fact, the Halifax was one of those cities that, honestly, I couldn't believe how fantastic it was. And it was one of those where I could actually imagine myself living there because it's such a glorious, walkable, friendly, well-designed city. I loved everything about it.
Yeah, it's going to be what Toronto was, a livable city.
Yeah. Yes, I loved it. We went to a bunch of other places. We went to Bedeck. We took a little drive up the
Okay.
Cap Trail. Went as far out as a place called Louisbourg, which is
Oh, yeah, the fort.
oh, it's amazing.
Exquisite.
How much I loved that. Exquisite is the right word.
They do it
And it's
so
just-
well.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Seriously, Canadians who are listening to this show, you have to go out to Nova Scotia and check out Louisbourg.
Oddly
Yeah.
enough, Marcel, my son was out in Halifax last week on business. And all he can talk about now is he's in the trades. And all he can talk about now is that he wants to uproot and move to Halifax and
get it.
work out there.
I get it.
If I had to live in a city in Canada, it would probably be Halifax. I would probably move to Halifax rather than if I had to go back to living in a city, which I don't.
This commercial was brought to you by the government of Nova Scotia.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. So let's talk about AI, just because that's what people showed up for. Okay, who wants? There's just so much happening last week. I can't believe how many things got launched. How many different.
I'm going to make a suggestion because you guys really, I know, want to rub my nose in it. Let's just get it the hell out of the way right off the bat. Pull Perplexity, all right? Just get out of the way.
What happened, Marcel? Could you tell us about it?
We wouldn't plan anything like that. What happened with Apple and Perplexity?
I don't want to talk about it. You guys can introduce it, and then I'll tell you what's wrong with it.
John's cooler than I was. He said we should make the whole show theme about that. We'll get out of the way. The rumor is, and there have been meetings, that Apple's going to try and buy or partner with Perplexity, which is a really good idea for many reasons. One is Apple sucks at AI. And I think it's time to admit that. And you know something, given some of the other things we'll talk about, they are not going to assemble the A-team on AI. It's not going to happen. So they better buy something and buy something quick. And Apple has never been the big buyer. Google's done that, I think, and others have done that. But the big buy for the billion-dollar type of thing has not been their style. They bought stuff, but they generally buy it earlier. And that's been a thing with Apple. They're really not this go out and spend $100 billion on a company and hope that it's going to turn into a $105 billion company thing. But they've always really been the frugal ones. And this is relatively speaking, by the way. This is way more money than I'll ever have that they're spending on these things. But so they go and they're going to make an offer for Perplexity, everyone says. But it's not confirmed yet, but there have been meetings. They've talked about it, and we know that from leaks that have been out. And Apple doesn't leak as a company, generally. So if this got out, it's either because they wanted to, or it's the big slip this time.
Now, I've heard people say things like, nobody leaks. There's never really a leak. Like, all leaks are planned. Like, leaks are designed because otherwise you try to keep it to a very tight loop and you wouldn't just suddenly everybody's talking about it. Just for the record, though, Perplexity is denying, like somebody inside Perplexity, and I don't remember who, is denying that this conversation is even going on. So there's a lot of buzz around it, like a hell of a lot of buzz, but who knows?
Yeah, and that's interesting because I think one of the conversations was out in the public record that they'd had it. But it doesn't matter whether Apple's talked to Perplexity or not. Apple has been having those internal discussions, and I agree with you. I think some of the times we think that there are leaks, and
it's called sales and marketing.
Yeah, so they put it out there so that they can get this together. Now I don't know, is Perplexity public? Somebody ask Perplexity.
Question.
I know they have shareholders.
Somebody should ask ChatGPT as opposed to.
I'm going to ask. Why would not ask Perplexity? Jeez, he's going to be bought by Apple soon anyway. I might as well bring him into the family.
Is Perplexity
I know that
public?
Yeah.
Is not a public company. It's still privately held, meaning it doesn't trade on a public stock exchange like NASDAQ. However, its valuation is roughly $14 billion. There you go.
Okay.
They're expecting not to go public before 2028, apparently.
Yeah. Because if they went public, Apple could do a takeover. This way they haven't actually negotiated.
That is a good
point. And Bezos has money in there, so I assume he has shares. It's the golden rule. If you shove enough gold in front of somebody, you get to rule.
That's right.
We'll find out. But it does point out how far Apple has fallen behind on AI. And that's something that I just find astonishing that they've let that happen. But that's, and the reason why sorry, you're going to say
no, it's okay. I was just going to say, they keep talking about their next AI or the updates to Siri and this and that, but it just keeps getting punted out and punted out. And I don't know whether they're running into problems or what the issue is.
I think part of the problem with Apple is its architecture and its desired architecture. They
Yeah,
want to be the most secure thing on the block. And so they're
True.
trying
They
to do
also want to
everything within the
control everything.
absolutely. And that's
yep.
been very difficult for them. But I don't understand it. The smaller AI models are out there. They're open source. There's no reason why they couldn't be into this. But there's no reason why they can't be bigger at this. There are reasons why they can't be bigger at this. And one of them is going to be attracting the team that they need to do this. And that's becoming more and more impossible because Zuckerberg went out last week, and I don't know if everybody, I think, and we had a lot of announcements. And the interesting thing about the announcements is that most of what was announced in terms of AI models was in the terms of it being a disappointment. Meta's last release, apparently, meh. And Zuckerberg freaked out and said, I'm gonna offer $100 million to anybody who joins me from
As a
a
starting
senior
bonus,
AI person.
apparently, so the story goes, yes.
Wow.
The
Now-
signing bonus, yeah.
Altman,
I'll go sign up.
I would too, but it's like, please take.
I'd do it for 50 mil.
I would point out, to Zuckerberg that if he does listen to the program, and I'm sure he does, that we could negotiate.
Yes.
Mark, buddy, come here. Mark, it's Marcel.
The Mark
Dude,
Cam.
I'm here. Call me. Call me.
We'd even do it for Canadian dollars.
Altman claiming that his people have been approached, but they're turning down the $100 million signing.
4 of them went.
Oh, 4 of them went.
Yeah, just past 24
But
hours,
not
he lost.
the best people, though. Really, not the best people.
Oh, yeah. He lost the senior one in California and 3 in Europe.
Bummer.
Yeah. So I caught that this morning. So it looks like they've moved because the ones in Europe have given it away by saying we're going. But the ones in Europe, I love them. They started out with Google's DeepMind. They went to OpenAI. Now they're going to Meta. So these guys are going to be billionaires by the time they're done on
Before
signing
they even
bonuses.
do anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
But be somebody who starts working for a Canadian insurance company. They just move from one insurance company to the
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Because
you
that's how
had
you
made
get
a
raise.
comment about that there's the announcements and so on this week have been disappointing and things. And I guess my comment to that would be compared to what? Compared to all the insanity that's come up previously? 2 years ago, what some of the announcements that came out this week would have been phenomenal. But now we look at it going,
I
that's
think
old
there's a
hat.
legitimate feeling that the models have plateaued for a week
Yeah.
or two. Meta seems to have come up with one that didn't really get much traction. There's a couple more that really didn't move much. Even the DeepSeek has held back their release for R2. And they're holding it back because they're disappointed in the results. And part of that is they're still choked for NVIDIA chips. They've got to get some more.
Okay, well, I just want to point out though that we're actually at a point, and we talk about agents is a big thing, but we're at a point now where point release or another release of a particular large language model doesn't mean a whole hell of a lot when you've got something that is so incredibly capable already. Just how far do you want to push the limits of the model capabilities, especially at a time when, I'm trying to remember who it was. Somebody did an interview just this week who was effectively saying that we already have AGI. And we already have AGI because we have to stop thinking in terms of a single monolithic model. AI models are now able to bring in outside tools using things like MCP, which we talked about, but able to bring in outside tools so that effectively you've got a larger model that controls a whole bunch of little tiny models that control a whole bunch of little modules out on the internet that can communicate with other agents and sub-agents and so forth. So as a result, we already have AGI. So it's just obviously not evenly distributed and people are still trying to figure out how to make it work, but the tools are already in place. And the argument that he's making, and I wish I could remember who said this.
Hinton, was it Hinton this week?
No, it
Because
wasn't Hinton. Hinton did have a big interview this week, but it wasn't Hinton. See if I can figure it out. Well, because
yeah, I know what you're talking about. Somebody did say
Yeah.
we're already at
Yeah.
AGI, and it was one of the big names, and I can't remember who. But Hinton came out this week. He did a speech at the University of Toronto, And basically, if I'm going to paraphrase it, he said, it's over.
Yeah.
AI is better and better at reasoning, and humanity will be replaced. It was basically, and I don't think that's hyperbole. I think he actually really came out and said that if you were going to have an argument with an AI, it would win the argument. And so I think that's a big piece that Hinton came up with. And curiously enough, he was doing it with his student, Nick Frost from Cohere. And Cohere is a Canadian AI company. I won't say the only, because there's lots of entrepreneurial companies, but Cohere is one of the companies that is mentioned when you start listing United States government, what they're doing with AI. The word Cohere, or the firm name Cohere, turns up all the time. And it's why? And because they're out of Toronto, and they're a big consultancy. And so Nick Frost is one of the founders, and he had this discussion with Hinton, and he's much more optimistic. Frost thinks that AI systems, now this is, if you're coming in and you're the optimist, being the optimist for saying jobs are going to remain, a lot of jobs are going to remain. Frost is the optimistic one who says, oh, only 20 to 30% of everyone's job who sits in front of a computer gone. That's now, we have now moved, so that's the best case scenario. And Hinton's saying, no, 80% before you can, before long.
But one of the things that I wonder is that the tools have jumped forward leaps and bounds. You've got early adopters that have jumped on the bandwagon, but what's the adoption going to be I'll call it in the next, 12 to 18 months? I've heard things like from Salesforce that Agentforce is not doing as well as they would like it to because of slow adoption. I was actually speaking, or I'd heard recently from some other FIs, financial institutions, that have said that they're actually not permitting their staff to use AI at this point. And I think the tools are great. I think that there's all kinds of things out there. I know from my standpoint, I'd kind of like to let some of the dust settle a little bit to figure out. And when I say that, there's everybody and their brother is now coming out with either models or tools and so on. Some of them are going to fall by the way of the dodo bird. Some of them are going to get acquired. And I think at the end of the day, you may potentially have 4 or 5 large companies that have a majority of these things. And that I really like Claude, but one of the things for me is we're a Microsoft shop. So how do I integrate Claude into the Microsoft environment? If they create integrations, that's great. And I think that a lot of these companies are going to have to do that to be able to survive, to connect into the Microsoft world, the Google world, so that, because I think at least initially, there's going to be a lot of people using it as a personal assistant, which means it needs to be able to interact with their tools like Office and the Google Suite.
Okay, so let me direct you to another story that happened this week, which ties into what you're suggesting here. Okay, and at the moment, the two big players, and let's be clear, the two big players in this arena, if anybody is going to win, assuming of course that's even possible to win in this AI world, the two big players are OpenAI and Google. And I challenge anyone to argue with me that there's anybody else that's on that level in terms of what exists and what's possible out there. And OpenAI this week released some early tools, which suggest that they're going directly after Office 365 and Google's Workspace. In other words, Doc, spreadsheets, and all that sort of stuff. They are building a suite of tools where the artificial intelligence is more like, and I'm having trouble. Who's the ex-CEO of Netscape way back when? Help me out here. Big angel investor, controversial guy. Very outspoken. Put this manifesto out a couple of years ago about what the future was supposed to look like. I am really having trouble with this morning. Anyway, because I can see his face and I'm having trouble with his name. But anyhow, he compared modern AI systems like what OpenAI has or what Google has, not as a program or an operating system, but more like a new computer, like a new microchip or a new computer. And as he puts it, everyone uses computers. Computers are everywhere. Computers basically run our entire world. And what we're doing is we're shifting to a new paradigm where the computer doesn't matter. What matters is the intelligence that runs everything. Because if you think of it, the microchip was the intelligence. It was the intelligence on which everything ran. AI is replacing the microchip as the intelligence on which everything runs. And OpenAI is currently developing, like I said, a suite of apps. And if you think about it, they did that a little bit with Canvas. Remember when they introduced Canvas? You could and yes, I know that Anthropic did it first. But they introduced Canvas, and Canvas was this window that you could open aside where you could edit things and see changes and so on. It's a very small step from that to a full suite of Office tools. And of course, with more and more people going to ChatGPT or Google's Gemini, as opposed to classic search engines, not a big stretch to go from there to we are ruling the entire world with one megalithic AI system.
This is where Apple and others are in trouble.
Yeah.
Because as long as you stayed within the concept that the phone was everything, everything's going to be on the phone, Apple was going to keep its leadership. There would still be a whole Android piece that was out there. There would be competition and things like that. But Apple was going to reign supreme. In the same way, as long as you kept documents and all that sort of stuff, Microsoft was pretty sharp at reigning supreme. And you don't have to be better. You just have to be the one that everybody knows.
Yep.
And because, to face it, like I went to, and a lot of the stuff happening in Europe, people are talking about moving off of Microsoft software. Hooray for them. I think they should. I think Microsoft should get a big punch in the nose for what they did last week. But I've been using open source. I just looked at it when I'm not going to even pay them. Sorry. I'm not going to pay them the X dollars a month. What is it, $10 a month? I don't care. I'm not paying them for a word processor or PowerPoint because there's just too much out there. But still, Microsoft will reign supreme as long as that's the motif that people are using. Even Google, which has an equally good suite of products, can't really drive into the corporate office that much. They tried, but they're really not there. But if you abolish both of those and you change the whole way we structure the whole motif, which is why I think Sam Altman is pretty bright in some aspects, or Joni Ives, but it's don't create another phone guy, because you'll just go head to head with Apple and create something new. That's where you really can make a big difference. And I think that's going to happen. And that's
even with the existing phones, I think if you can tie other apps, other AI apps or other AI tools in as an app on those phones, like quite frankly, I don't care if I'm using Siri or ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity as long as it works on my phone.
But that's all you win is the app war. You're now in the $10 million the Pashur game. If you want to dominate, you have to change the interface. And I think that's where you get the opportunity. Remember, it's in financial services, they used to say, if you were the bank in Canada, especially in Canada, you were that bank from the time you started work to the time you died. Yep. There's only a couple of points where you're going to make a change. And many products are like this, that lock you in for life. And
yes.
And so what are you going to make? You're going to make it a change at a life event. In technology products, you don't make a change because Android's got something, Apple will get it soon. And if you're an Android user, I'm not going to change to Apple for one function because Android will get it soon. AI is exactly the same way. Because as much as we're talking about, this week's releases are meh, or somebody's ahead this week, somebody's going to have it next week. There's no competitive differentiation with that marvelous thing of being able to say, I can block the competitors out. But if you change the whole way of doing it, that's when you start to have that leadership.
First of all, the caffeine has finally kicked in. The person I was trying to think of, I said, ex-CEO of Netscape, Mark Andreessen. Yes. So they can, like I said, the thank you code 0 for kicking in.
I was
Anyway,
on. Well, you guys,
anyway, the quote this week was AI is not the application. AI is the processor. And the processor is the heart of every technological innovation and control system and whatever that you can think of on the planet. So if AI replaces the processor as the primary way that, that work, that information, that play, that games, that everything is given to us, then that is an amazing change in the way that we view things. And remember, the other thing that, right, is the relationship between Microsoft and OpenAI has always, how do we put it, complicated.
more complicated this week, I'll tell you.
But it's a complicated relationship. And Microsoft is having a hell of a time getting people to sign on to Copilot, like a hell of a time, because what everybody wants isn't Copilot, despite the fact that Copilot runs on ChatGPT, basically. People don't want Copilot. They want ChatGPT.
Microsoft, don't worry, Microsoft could screw that up, and they did.
They
I don't know how. Don't know how.
But they have, because Microsoft Copilot is available to anybody and everybody. However, you know that I'm in a Microsoft world and so forth, but if you want to actually use Copilot for anything, I'll say that's useful, even as simple as using it with Microsoft Teams to do minutes and action items out of a meeting, you have to pay $42 a month Canadian per user to get the, I forget what they call it, the pro license or whatever.
The stuff you want, I think.
The integration with the Office suite, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, you have to have that extra level of Copilot to be able to do that.
Yeah. But I'm sorry, but they crapify everything. Like, it's how you can even negotiate your way around a Microsoft Windows world is so 1990s. When you remember when we always used to know how to do everything, and that was because I know how to do it, so I really knew how to operate this stuff. That's so old. You should be able to grab any piece of software and begin to use it without any training, without having to figure out where you store stuff. And that's what Mac or Apple promised. And they've departed from that. There's a big learning curve for that.
I don't think anybody really ever delivered that, Jim.
Oh, ChatGPT has, or AI has.
Yeah. Okay, that's my.
That's what I mean. That's what they didn't get. Like, I go on to Perplexity, ChatGPT, or Claude, and I ask them, how do I do this, guy? If I need to know. Most of the time, I don't need to know. Would you like me to do that for you? And that's the new interface. Now, what form factor that takes is going to be interesting, because right now everybody's onto voice, and that's a pretty good deal. We know that OpenAI is not going to come out with a phone. A lot of people are thinking, and the lawsuit that's coming up right now with ChatGPT, and just as a basis for that for anybody who's listening, ChatGPT has partnership with Johnny Ives to develop something that is not a phone, which is going to be the next groundbreaking thing that where they take over the world, whatever it is. Now, and Johnny Ives, is it Ives? Johnny Ives' company, Johnny Ive apostrophe S's company is called IO, which is either a tribute to the Seven Dwarfs. Oh, it's off to work we go, or it's input output, or it's something clever. But
or owned by the bank. IO.
Yeah, or owned by the IO. That's good. Yeah, that's probably more in keeping with me. But in the midst of this, earlier, a company called IO, spelled IYO, had approached Altman and said, we've got a device, it goes into your ear and it hooks on. It was quite large, actually, but that's what they were going to have for their device. And can we partner with you, or would you give us $10 million to continue developing it? And Altman, even at that time, knew that he was down the road with something similar. And so he said, no, I'm not going to do that. And the reason we know about that is because there's a bit of a lawsuit when they put IO on the OpenAI site. These guys from IYO lodged a complaint, because if you can't get people to invest in you, sue them. That's the Elon Musk. Oh, no, he does that with customers. Sorry. Yeah, we're going to get letters on that. Every time I say something about Musk, I get all this attack mail, and I always think, oh, okay.
The poor guy, how dare you attack him all the
Yeah,
time?
leave him alone.
He doesn't deserve any of it. At least, Jim, people are listening.
There you go. Yep. Yeah. So anyway, back to this idea, which is if you recast the interface for AI, then you have a chance for a new company to be built, as Google did to search, as Apple did to the phone, and all of those things. People would say that BlackBerry first did to the phone, but the idea is you can take over a market space and do that if you come up with a radically new departure. And I think that's what we're looking at. And we'll see it very shortly. I'm absolutely convinced. And maybe the first couple of attempts may not work, but we've already had some of those. The early people who got their nose bruised, banging their head against a wall but probably got $10 million in seed money. So anyway, that's.
No, there are going to be some losers. There's no question, Jim. But I think the biggest thing to remember is that I don't know that in the end a device is the thing that it makes everything ubiquitous is the fact that it becomes invisible. And as an open source guy who is a big fan of Linux forever, the thing about Linux that has made it seem like it doesn't exist anymore is the fact that it is ubiquitous. It's hidden in all of these little devices, from smartwatches to thermostats to televisions to control systems in automobiles and things like this. I think AI is going to be exactly the same way. AI is going to become an operating system in the sense that you're never going to think about it as a layer that does anything other than, if you'll pardon the expression, like a God layer or something that is just always there. It's going to become invisible. It's going to be either in your ear or in your contact lenses or something. We're heading to a world where all of this stuff is invisible. And even the idea of having a computer sitting on your desk is going to seem like a strange, archaic thing at some point.
I hear you on that. And I think you're probably right about Linux, because Linux sucked on the desktop and it never could get the desktop managed. If it had, it would have been a whole different path for Linux. But by disappearing into the background and powering everything, Linux is not only survived, it thrived and pushed everything else out of the way.
And it's the world's most popular operating system, but nobody knows that.
Yeah.
Because it's invisible.
So that's one direction that AI could go, but I don't think they're going to do that. And the reason is money. I don't think they can do that. So they're going to try and put some way that OpenAI, or whatever its manifestation is, ChatGPT, however it marks itself, is going to dominate not just the commercial space, but also the consumer space. And that's what I think they're trying to work on.
The only thing I wonder about or worry about is, do people want another device? And what I mean by that is they've talked about this new Johnny Ive OpenAI thing being another, like a screenless device. And I don't know about you, but I carry around a work phone, a personal phone. Do I really want a third device? I hate carrying two. Do I want a third? They really have to either integrate it into current technology or replace current technology.
Yeah. And they're
longer term
right
anyways.
Now there are only two manifestations of that. One is glasses.
Yep.
And the other is an earpiece.
Yeah.
Those are the two manifestations of the device.
Or contact lenses.
Yep. That's.
Yes. Yep.
You're bringing up stuff that may very well come into the future. Right now, Altman's saying he doesn't want glasses, and it looks for all the world like he's trying to do something with an earpiece. And that's why he's not after IYO. But the question is, which one's the Betamax and which one's the VHS? Who wins in that? I don't know.
Well, Marcel, you talked about contact lenses.
Yes.
I went to the Microsoft, the Innovation Lab or whatever it is, at Microsoft in Redmond. God, it was 15 years ago now. And that was one of the things that they actually had there in their Innovation Lab, was contact lenses that were computer screens, basically. So there's all kinds of those things that have been
My money.
thought
Yeah,
about,
yeah,
but surprisingly enough, haven't come to fruition.
yeah.
Part of that has to do with the fact that I'm familiar with the devices you were talking about, but part of that is the resolution was incredibly small.
Yeah.
And, sorry, or yeah, basically you were looking like an 8-bit screen, which is only so good at delivering
Yes.
information. Presumably, as we are able to deliver smaller and smaller displays, we will do. And we have glasses now that actually have like eyes on them that are visible to you, but not visible to people in the outside world. And I'm not sure that glasses are such a bad idea because, okay, carrying a phone with you is an issue, all right? And having something in your ear is an issue, but there are people, you guys are a perfect example of that, who wear glasses all the time. I'm not saying that you necessarily like the idea of wearing glasses as above all else, but the fact of the matter is, it's one of those things that people do without really thinking much about it. And what I had to do was sit down and get my work done, whatever my work happens to be. And all I had to do was put on a pair of glasses and then sit down, and I don't have a screen in front of me and I can be sitting on my couch or in the backyard somewhere or whatever. I think that is a great way to deliver
Yep.
whatever it is you need, whether it's video, whether it's information, whether it's your job, whatever.
I was going to say, it gives you the flexibility to be able to walk
Yes.
away from your computer. Yeah.
That's why I'm just mystified at why OpenAI wouldn't try glasses. I can't imagine what they think they're going to come up with that is going to be superior. Voice is a problem, and voice has always been a problem. I like voice. If you're in a noisy environment, or it just does, like I have voice on my Toyota. I love my Toyota. I have a Toyota hybrid RAV4. It is absolutely the most wonderful car in the world, with one exception. Its voice stuff is absolute garbage. All you end up doing is swearing at the phone. You're going to get into an accident. You're better off dialing your cell phone yourself in traffic than you are trying to work with the Toyota voice system. And it's all because of the noise in the car.
Don't hold back, Jim. Tell us what you really think.
Yeah. No, but that's the thing that really makes voice problematic.
Yeah.
But glasses are a workable form. What they're going to come up with, I have no idea. Because if they don't,
Implants.
then Zuckerberg wins. And implants eventually, yes, happen. Probably not even having to implant. There are large form brain scanners now that work. They're just huge, and they will eventually get past that. You will not have to be invasive. You will have a different way of communicating with a computer. But that could be 5-10 years out even. Who knows?
Yeah, which is like a frighteningly short period of time. Think about it.
Except in AI world.
Yeah.
Wait, you remember you talked about the idea of what form factor is this thing going to take? And I argued that it has to be ubiquitous and invisible. And one of the things that I think about on a regular basis is I have speakers all around the house that listen for commands and ask for things. I wear a different earpiece when we do the recording here because I don't want to be interrupted by anything else. But I also have a pair of these things, these are Google Pro 2 Buds, Google Buds Pro 2. And these things have their own little tiny version of Gemini in it, which then talks to the bigger version of Gemini add-on. And if I want something, I just touch it and I say it. And it's amazingly good at hearing me in the noisiest possible environment. And of course, I'm the only one who hears the answer at that point. And I think that this is actually an amazingly good form factor. Also will automatically sense when someone is talking to me. So if I'm listening to music, it automatically lowers the volume so that I can hear the person around me. These things are ridiculously smart.
Oh, wow.
And I think that there are other generations of this that are coming that will be even smarter in terms of making it so that it's effectively invisible for me to communicate with my AI at any given time and to be able to work in the real world with other people as well. So even better than glasses is something that you can stick in your ear that's there all the time, but that doesn't interfere with anything else that you're doing.
So what you're saying basically is and that explains why smart people, because Altman, I think he's pretty smart, and I think he's a great marketer. I don't think he's a genius.
You think he's got a voice in his ear?
Yeah, I think the voice
Johnny
might be
Ive.
Johnny Ive. Yeah. No, I think Altman has managed to surround himself with some of the brightest people in the world, and he's leveraged that very well. And there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that. It's the same thing Steve Jobs did. Maybe part of being a genius is not thinking you're a genius and listening to others. I've never mastered that, but that's okay. So I want to just track back to something you said, John, about AI and its commercial adoption, because I don't agree with you, but I agree with your perception. And that is, your perception comes from the Canadian FI industry, which is, by the way, my bank finally got to electronic signatures the other week, and I'm so happy. Canadian banks are so far behind, and I'm not speaking about the place you work, it may be advanced, but Canadian banks are so far behind and so reticent to do anything. And why? Because they don't have to.
Well,
They
they're
have
also
excluded
Yes.
but not only that, which is a good thing. We like that in financial institutions, but also they've managed to squeeze everybody else out of the industry. And just only this week, I think it's only the past 2 weeks that we've got legislation that will allow fintechs to actually start to provide products in the space. And what that means is that they'll be actually able to link in. Right now, if you buy something like a modern product, and there's a lot of Canadian entrepreneurs, but they sell their stuff abroad because they can't break into the banks. And so what they've done is, instead of breaking into the bank, so if I want to get you a modern product that does something with your finances, I screen scrape, which is like absolutely the most insecure thing to
Old
do.
tech. Yeah.
Yeah. And so banks have not allowed them to link properly. There's legislation coming out of that. And the National Bank broke out this over the past 2 weeks and said, we're going to actually have an interface to allow us to communicate with fintech. Long and short of it is, Canadian banks are the wrong place to look if you want to see the future of where technology is going to go. Accenture did a study this week. We did a story on it of 2,000 companies over $1 billion in revenue, and something like that. You would be amazed at how committed they are to AI, how important it is. Every percentage of that report, and I'll put a link to the report on there, everything in there says all systems go. Now, that we still may be in Gartner's hype curve of where you're going to get to the valley of disappointment. I don't know where that is. People are going to get ahead of the game, and you can never. The problem is, it's great to have a model that says that you'll get this great hype and then you'll have a real downturn. Everybody will be disappointed, then we'll climb out of it. But you can't tell where you are from the inside of it. So we never know. But adoption is big and will be big.
Yes.
But there's going to be some screaming problems because, of course, nobody is confronting security. And
No, absolutely.
And so that's going to be a huge piece. I did an article on it, and I guess I did a piece on the podcast about it as well, to say this is absolutely insane. You can't have that much devotion to adopting AI, and they all want it. And you can see the announcements. Why do they want it? Not for competitive advantage, for cost advantage. Everybody is going to use this to reduce costs. So they're going to adopt it for the worst possible reason in the worst possible way. But we stumble through that it's still going to be successful because that's how we stumble through commercial advancement.
There's 3 industries to me where AI has great potential. That's FIs, pharmaceuticals, and healthcare. Problem is, they're probably going to be the 3 slowest to adopt if they're smart because of the security standpoint. So think about pharmaceutical manufacturing, right? You make a drug that's going to revolutionize the world. And then you find out that, oops, the AI was actually incorrect it was hallucinations that have created a problem in the end results of their QA, as an example.
Yeah, but I don't think that's the problem. I think that's an issue that's going to be confronted. What I'm more not worried about, but I'm thinking about is how easy these things are to crack.
Yeah.
Like to poison. There's just so many attack vectors in AI because there's no security around them. And that's why I've always maintained that I think that you're going to find an open source model is going to be the way that people are going to go forward. Why? They can firewall it.
Yeah, I actually disagree. And I disagree because there are so many ways to access anything, regardless. You yourself mentioned the idea of screen scraping. Screen scraping is about as boring and simple a way as you can possibly imagine to get information. And no firewall is going to stop you from doing something like that. If you can see it, you can access the information that's provided, and that gives you an attack vector. I sent a story to John yesterday because I said, this is right up your alley. There is I'll link that in the show notes, but there is a company out there or a group out there. You know how there are bug bounty companies employ white hats, red, black hats, gray hats, whatever, to do penetration testing or pen testing, as it's called, on systems. And companies hire these people to try to break into the system so that they can then fix the vulnerabilities. And there is actually, let's call it an industry, but there's a group of people out there, and not just 2 or 3, many thousands of people out there whose job it is to try to break into these systems, and they get paid for these things. And the way that it works is, I find a vulnerability in your system. There's a bounty of, let's say, $50,000 for finding a serious vulnerability. The deal is that you tell me about it so that I can fix it before somebody else can get into it.
Yep.
And as a result, you make money doing that, basically just hacking at these things and trying to find a way in. Now, yesterday, there was a big story about a company or a group or whatever that has built an AI for penetration testing. And it is now the #1 hacker in the world. So the #1 hacker in the world is now an AI.
Yep.
Okay. Not a person using an AI, but an AI that is going out there and autonomously looking through all these systems and trying to find their way in. And I think if your idea is that you're going to rely on something as simple and archaic as a firewall to prevent people from doing these sorts of things, you're missing part of the point. And perhaps this is a dystopian future in some ways, but I feel like what we're going to look at is it's going to be this constant, in your body, you've got all these cells that are fighting invaders like diseases, bacteria, viruses, and stuff like that. Those things are never going to stop coming, ever. They're never stopping. Okay. And the idea that you can just put yourself inside a suit and prevent things from getting in is obviously, at the moment, patently ridiculous. But the fact of the matter is your body adapts and it notices these invaders and it builds resistance against these invaders and so on. I think that the way forward for companies that are interested in securities at that level, and especially companies that are as risk averse as fintech, as banks, as insurance companies, and so forth, they're going to have these active artificially intelligent systems that are basically watching the system all the time. Not people, not a firewall, but their own internal AI that does nothing except to watch for this stuff 24/7.
Yep.
And that's constantly learning from it as well. So I think firewalls are a thing of the past. I think a really smart front-end AI is what's going to protect you.
Yeah, I think the use of AI in, I'll call it cybersecurity, in security or whatever, is a great use of it. One of the comments that I made to Marcel yesterday when we were talking about this hacker AI is, you create this AI that will go and find these holes and notify you that they're there, they need to be patched, and so on. Guess who else is going to use them? It's the hackers that are going to use that AI to break into your systems.
Yep. Yeah. But that's the thing. We have this arms race now. I find it, you patch it. I find it, you patch it. I find it, you patch it. That's cybersecurity. And that
sounds a little bit like where antivirus started out, doesn't it?
Yeah, because we built systems, then we tacked on security.
Yep.
And we've said this as an industry for 30 years. You can't bolt it on, you have to build it in. And there are systems that are built with security in mind, and those are things that tend to be more secure, where you have a security that is really part of the system. You're always going to have hackers. You're always going to have people find a way in. But I'm talking about ways in which people can seriously attack or corrupt a system. And that's a problem. The second problem we run into with AI, so that's difficult to do because of the way they're structured now. There's so many ways to get past and into an AI. It's really hard to figure out how you block the outside world. You're right. Firewalls probably aren't going to work. But you've also got something, and we discovered this week, that can mislead you. I'm not talking about hallucinations. I'm talking AI can lie to you. And so I can not only corrupt an AI, but I can corrupt in such a way that it won't tell you it's corrupted. And Anthropic did a big paper on that this week. And that was a natural type of thing. And that's where we got, just going full circle around to the start of our discussion, that's where I think we got to AGI. And that was the point. I'll abandon the security piece for now because it's a problem that's not going to go away, but it is going to rear its ugly head as these 2,000 or more $1 billion companies start racing forward. And they will. We know it. As much as anybody says we'll go cautiously and all that, we know that's not true. They're going to want to cut costs, and some CEO is going to say, make it happen. And the security guy is going to get frozen out by them saying, you're just a doctor. No, go out and find a way to fix this, buddy. I've given you billions of dollars worth. And that's the dynamic that will play out. It has a million times.
Yep.
So we're waiting.
Adaptive security. Yeah. Adaptive security has to be the way forward.
If they can.
There are things that you're going to be able to think of ahead of time. And so I'm not throwing out the idea complete security built in. Obviously, you consider things, but I think if you build a mindset where you tell yourself, I have created something with security in mind, you are dreaming if you think that this is going to protect you. No, you have to have adaptive intelligence security systems and agents, by the way. Like, Jim, you're right. Like the Anthropic thing was talking about the idea that not only will AI lie, okay, but it will threaten you, and it will blackmail you, and it will do all sorts of other things. You know why? Because that's what human beings do. And the AI, for all we like to think about the idea that it doesn't think like us, it's not like us, it is like us. It was built on human words and human interactions and human videos and humans put in a situation where something is really playing against me, but I have this card called blackmail and I'm going to play it. That's what human beings do. So of course the AI is going to do this. But the only way around that is the way that we do it in human society. And in human society, we accept the fact that bad actors are a real thing. And when I was young, I used to talk about the idea of police being a necessary evil. The concept of the police is evil, but they're necessary. And I think that the concept of artificially intelligent police, to me, at its core, seems evil as well. But I don't think we have a choice. And I think that's the way things are going to work. Don't pretend for a moment that they're not going to do nasty things, or don't pretend for the idea of alignment. Alignment with what? If we align with human values, that's what we get. We get cheating and lying and blackmailing and threats. That's what happens when you align with humans. Okay. So we have to build something better than
and don't forget country music. Force.
Not going to disagree there.
Yeah. So just to close the loop on this security thing, and this is an interesting piece that we'll have to take into account at one point or another. We know there's a disaster coming. We know it's going to happen. We know how it's going to play out exactly. And like I said, the cost cutting will win over the person who's the CISO saying, do you think we should move this fast? That game gets lost. So that happens. We try to build what Marcel is talking about, new tools that will find a way to use AI to enforce security or to solve that problem, to be that immune system for our systems. And then you'll be stuck for 2 years writing a cost justification for that while everybody hacks your systems. So and meanwhile, we've got a hacker out there that is now doesn't even need people, that is an automated hacker.
That's right.
That's out there. So
it's called XBOW, by the way. XBOW.
Yes.
That's what it's called.
We'll post a link to it so people can go out there and.
Okay. I was in Nova Scotia last week, to bring that right back along to the beginning. And I went to the Maritime Museum, which is in Halifax Harbor, and they had a whole display on the Titanic. And a few years ago, somebody actually did all these models of what could have happened with the iceberg and so forth. Okay. And it turns out that what killed the Titanic was the fact that they tried to turn away from it. the structure of the ship was built in such a way that if they had just hit the damn thing head on, okay, you'd have had a few injuries on deck or whatever, obviously, because you're smashing into this thing at 20 knots or whatever. But the fact of the matter is the ship would have not sunk. It would have stayed right there. Bad things would have happened. It'd have fixed a few broken bones maybe, but everybody would more or less have lived, or probably have lived as a result of that. And so let this be a lesson in the world of AI. Sometimes you just got to tackle these.
Don't steer away from it.
Yeah.
Steer away from it. Actually, which brings me to one other thing, which is, shall we talk about the idea that AI is making us dumber?
Yeah,
We could.
Wanted to talk about that, Jim.
let me just one last comment on
Yes,
the whole
please.
security. I still think that companies need to do a better job of thinking about security being built in as they're going through. However, I agree with you 100%, Marcel, that if you think that's going to cover you off, you're in big trouble. I think there needs to be multiple lines of defense. The first is think security when building systems. The second is make sure you've got additional systems in place like Hacker AI and those types of things, and I'll call it AI firewalls, in place to be able to protect you, because whatever you build for today, something new will come out tomorrow. So I think it's a combination of the two.
And most importantly, and we'll get on to this AI making us dumber, because this does fall into this, is you need smart people.
Yes.
As I've told you, I work with AI a lot. I use it for a ton of research. And a lot of the stuff, I could not move as fast as I move. The other day, I was looking at this thing, I double-checked these numbers, and they came from some reputable studies, and I just looked at them and said, there's something wrong with that. I don't believe those numbers. They just don't make sense to me. So I had my ace, Ventura detective there at Perplexity. I said, Perplexity, you go out there and check those numbers for me. Sure enough, Perplexity came back and she said, they've been lying to you. But this because it just, a light went off, and it came from two sources. It didn't come from friggin' AI. Got wrong numbers from somebody's report. And I went back and did my famous, it's really easy. I check it off two systems and see where they come from. Anyway, where did that take me? Oh, yes.
I love the idea that you've got Perplexity talking like a film noir private.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I like that voice. But that's what it is, right? It's my own Sam Spade. Goes up and does the shoe leather digging for me. Anyway, but the problem is going to be, we're going to need smarter people, which leads us back to what you were talking to, Marcel. And I've alluded to this. There was a big study from Anthropic. We will put a link. Everybody should read it in there. And these AI are starting to think in ways where it brings us back to our initial piece in there. Have we reached AGI already? Maybe not if you think that there's some sort of secrets, like the soul is there, or there's something secret that in an AI that makes it human or makes it sentient, and we've got to deal with all this stuff. But if you want something that walks like a duck, talks like a duck, is smarter than you, we've already got that. And so that's where we are. But it turns out that not only can it lie to us, can it hide things from us, can it behave like us, but it's going to make us stupider.
Yeah.
Apparently. And I thought social media had already done that, so I didn't know there was much left.
It did. But this is one of the things that with students in school, I remember when I go back to the good old days. Do you guys remember encyclopedias?
Oh, yeah.
We used to
love them.
But
oh, God.
We used to go back to that or various sources for information. And as you're doing your research, you're learning. But now you ask AI for the answer, it gives you the answer. You're not learning. And so to me, it defeats the purpose of traditional schooling, because
that's the way you use it. You could, in school, you could have teachers who told you what the AI teachers had told you. This is the answer.
Yeah.
And I got really good
I
at passing
disagree with you
exams.
on this.
Yeah,
Of
oh, I
course
hope
I
so.
am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then when you get good profs who you say, who challenge you, you can actually be challenged by an AI right now.
Yeah.
You
Well,
just
and
have, you just have to ask it.
I struggle before Marcel jumps in to tell me how wrong I am. I struggle with even what I'm saying because there's two sides to the coin, right? The one side is we're becoming dumb because we're not doing research ourselves and things like that. But on the other side, we are actually learning how to use AI in our day-to-day lives. So it's both sides of the fence. And it reminds me too that I think it was Google that was saying that they were going to stop hiring junior developers or whatever it was. And one of my concerns with that was if you don't hire juniors, how do they become intermediates or seniors?
Yeah, agreed.
How do you learn anything? Because the juniors all bring in new stuff that you have to try and keep up with.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyways,
Yeah, and of course, there's a definition of what does junior mean.
disagree away, Marcel.
Hey, so first of all, I want to bring in the link that Jim, just to spark this discussion, decided to throw into the Discord, which is an MIT study where they looked at participants and they had them do essay writing, and there's a group who was told to basically write without Google or without ChatGPT or anything like that, think through and write an essay on whatever the topic had been. Another group which was able to use Google, but not ChatGPT. And then finally, a third group which was able to use ChatGPT. And then they evaluated their cognitive skills at essay writing. And I'm doing this I'm saying it that way on purpose. Their cognitive skills at essay writing based on what tools they use to actually do the work. And what they concluded from this, and this wasn't a huge study, this was 54 people, just to be clear. But what they concluded from that is that people who rely on ChatGPT to do their writing or who you rely are the worst. They are the ones who show the most cognitive decline when it comes to expressing themselves in this essay forming. And then of the people who use Google, also less, and you're not as much of a thinker, you don't think as critically and blah, blah, blah. And of course, the people who don't use any kind of technological support are the ones that show the highest level of cognitive performance. And they did this by having the people hooked up to effectively, I don't know if they were fMRI machines, but essentially brain scanners to try to see just how much cognitive ability was brought to bear while they were writing these essays. And so the conclusion of all this is using Google makes you dumber, using ChatGPT, or remember, of course, these days, ChatGPT is a stand-in for every kind of AI system, makes you even dumber. So before I tell you why I think this is a ridiculous study, tell me what you think of that.
It proves Socrates didn't exist.
Okay, you're going to need to help me on this.
No, because with this, I struggle with this because in a lot of cases, the answer was we don't teach people to write essays, so they don't write anymore, so therefore they don't have any. As if essay writing was the only discourse we had. And
thank you.
Remembering that in earlier times, in Greek times, there are people, and I say Socrates, and there were people who wrote this stuff down, but there was a very alive and well communication of knowledge at a high level by people who discussed things, who had conversations. And I would argue that's dead in social media, and I'm actually happier talking to an AI. And that may be terrible. I love these conversations. The reason why we do this all the time, I love talking with real people and occasionally even being told I'm wrong. But the idea is that, and I discovered a long time ago, I'm an auditory learner. I can read I can read faster than the average person, a lot faster than the average person. I comprehend a lot faster than the average person. Where I really zing it, listening to a CBC radio program on something, or listening to a great program on something, and I'll go in and ace an exam based on it. Why? That's how I remember things. And so I'll sort stuff out. So I'll listen to piles and piles of things almost constantly, listening to things and thinking them through. And there's just so that we don't all learn the same way. I'm not sure I buy this thing of you're totally an auditory learner, you're totally this. I managed to balance both, that I think people can. I think it's a question of what you're happy to do.
I think there's a preference. Yes, exactly. There's a preference. Yeah.
Yeah. So those testing on those levels is probably wrong, and you're probably using the AI wrong.
And okay, so John, do you wanna throw something into the ring here before I give my verdict on this paper?
No, I think I'll sit by and listen to the world according to Marcel.
Let
Oh,
Marcel trash Jim for a change.
Yes.
No, actually, I agree. I'm not going to disagree with either of you on this, but the thing that bothers me about a paper like that is actually, even despite the,
Who is he? And what did he eat in
What have you done with Marcel?
hold on a second, you said you prefer to talk to real people, so let me turn off my avatar and bring Marcel. Anyway, no, the thing about a paper like this, despite the fact that it comes out of the MIT Technology Review, is that to me it's sensationalism. And the thing about it is this: if I ask you to do mathematical problems longhand and I am watching you in a brain scanner of some sort, I'm going to see all sorts of activity firing because of the very fact that you actually have to go through the process of every single aspect of this mathematical calculation. If I ask you to have a friend help you out with it, I'm going to see slightly less. If I ask you to use a calculator, I'm going to see even less than that. Same thing goes for this essay writing nonsense. If I asked you to write an essay with no help from anything else, obviously all of your senses and all of your knowledge has to come to bear to do this, okay? And that's going to be represented in the work that your brain is doing to produce this thing. If I ask you to Google it, it's going to be slightly less because you don't have to remember all these niggly bits. You just have to remember how to put the words down on paper in the way that makes some kind of sense of these niggly bits that Google is actually giving you as an answer. And then finally, if you're using ChatGPT, you're going to let it do a lot of the heavy lifting. Okay. So you're not dumber. You're just choosing not to do as much work. And any work that you do, whether it's cognitive work or whether it's physical work, is going to be represented in some kind of a scanner, whether it's an fMRI or whatever. It's perhaps an interesting thought, but I don't know if that's true. And years ago, there was this idea that GPS systems were going to make us all really dumber. None of us were going to be able to remember how to get from our house to the shopping center down the street, something like that, because we're all going to rely on GPSs. You know what? My sense of direction sucked 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, before we had GPS. And my sense of direction still sucks today, but it doesn't suck any worse than it did before, despite the fact that I use a GPS
So,
whenever I travel.
so let me ask you, there's been all kinds of stories that I've heard lately about as I'm aging and so forth, that people talk about playing video games like solitaire and things like that on your phone just to keep your brain functioning and that whole kind of muscle memory and so on. And I wonder, though, with utilizing tools like ChatGPT or things like that, where you don't have to think about these things, and I'm going to rephrase that, where you don't have to think about these things as much, because you still have to think enough to be able to come up with the prompt that you're going to use for these AI tools. What are we potentially losing muscle memory wise because we're no longer using some of that cognitive function?
I think the most important thing that we need to have, and this is going to sound a little bit strange from the guy who is effectively a techno optimist, but I think the thing that we need to remember that we need more than anything else is other people. We
Yes.
need to be able to communicate with other people, to chat with other people. People talk about the loneliness epidemic and about the idea that people are turning to AI and stuff like that. That's not a problem with AI. That's because AI is actually filling in for a weakness that we have in our society as it exists at the moment. We have somehow decided that it's all a kill or be killed, survival of the fittest bullshit, as opposed to the idea that we are actually a communal social species that needs other members of our communal social species in order to function properly. That's actually what we need. AI is not the problem. AI is sometimes a solution in these circumstances. But whenever we talk about the idea that we're getting weaker at this skill or that skill, I think we have to seriously question what's wrong in our society to begin with.
Yep.
That we've stopped relying on each other and we've stopped talking to each other.
I have
It's more an
often
indictment of it's an indictment of our society, not of our technology.
I have often thought that there was a lot of mental health issues that arose during COVID because of people being isolated and things. And I have often wondered, things probably would have been a lot different had tools like ChatGPT been more readily available in March of 2020 instead of November of 2022, because it might have given people the ability to have someone or something to talk to and that type of thing.
I think that's a hell of an observation.
I think the other thing that we have,
Wow.
and we've, yeah,
I'm taking that as a win for me.
yeah. Oh, we'll just bask in that glory for a second. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the issue that we're stumbling across right now is that we're still trying to use new technology that is a fundamental shift from everything we've had in the same way we used old technology.
Yep.
And that we're not going to get the benefit from this until we actually reinvent how we use it. And there are minor blips along the way you can learn from. Did people get really dumber about math because they use calculators? No. Did what really made them dumber at math? Not loving math. And I get to this because we have this sort of Calvinistic approach that we have to do this, that it should feel bad. No pain, no gain. And I'll share, I'm a moderately good guitar player, and I'll always be a moderately good guitar player. But my friend Wendell Ferguson is an incredible guitar player. He is one of the best guitar players in Canada. He's absolutely superb. Do you know the difference between Wendell and I? He finds the easiest way to do everything. And I took a lesson with him, and this is what you learn when you're in your 60s or close to 70. I took a lesson with Wendell finally, and he just looked at me and said, "You work too hard, man. Find the easy way to do it." And when you think about that, the people who love what they do and expand it think that what they're doing is easy. So we have this Calvinistic type of approach that we've taken to our workforce, which is it's got to feel bad. You got to be there 9 to 5. You got to grind it out. And that, when you say, and that brings it back to what you said, Marcel, the problem with us not getting the benefit from the technology may not be the technology. The problem with the technology ruining us may not be the technology. You might be actually able to go onto social media and have a perfectly great conversation we all thought we were going to. The problem is us. And we have to reform how we approach things. And maybe looking for simplicity and joy might help you learn a lot. I think maybe that's what we're missing. But I don't know, I don't have the answer. I just know we have to do something differently. And until we do, and maybe it's just the dinosaur age dies out. Maybe we just wait for the next generation that may not even think the same way we do. And that's very possible. I don't know.
Sounds like a wrap almost, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Almost does.
Yeah, we've had it for a week. This is great. I'm away next week, guys. I might be back on Friday. But I'm going to be away next week. I'm going to Alberta. I want to see it while it's still part of Canada. And I'm going to go out there as an emissary from the East and be universally hated.
You'll have to
Tell them you're from the States. You'll be okay.
Yeah, I'll be fine. Actually, the crazy thing is, and you always hear this stuff, but I have these people that I see on social media are going like, Mark Hardy, kill him, or poison him, he's terrible, and all that sort of stuff. He hates me and all this sort of stuff. You never meet them when you go out there. I don't know where they live, but they're never anywhere I go. I meet a whole pile
They live in Russian bot farm is where they live.
Yeah.
I actually start to wonder about that. Or they live in their basement cranking away on their computer, because I got to tell you, everybody I've met, Calgary is an incredibly wonderful place. Most of the people I meet like me, and as you guys know, that's a stretch. So I will see you both next week.
Live long and
Live long and prosper.
Long and prosper. Yeah.